Hey guys, so grab your coffee or beverage of choice and let's talk about this train wreck. So, I can admit when I'm wrong. I went into this movie thinking it would be simply a bad movie, and I was wrong. It's absolutely awful. I'm not just saying that, it's really that bad. Can you hear that noise? It's Emily Bronte rolling in her grave alongside Tolkien after the Rings of Power. And the marketing for this movie actually called it the greatest love story of all time. And I'm like, have you actually read this? Wrong side. Have you actually read this book? Look, is it a great book? Absolutely. But is it a great love story, as in a healthy portrayal of a love story? Absolutely not. We'll go into that a bit more later. But anyway, this actually makes the MTV version look good, and I'm not being dramatic. I actually genuinely do prefer that version to this. Does anyone even remember that movie? I feel like nobody even knows it exists. It's got some pretty good music in it, I'll give it that. I just feel sorry for poor Isabella. Heathcliff actually has Isabella, his wife, on the floor in a dog collar, acting like a dog. And she looks like she enjoys it. What sort of message is that sending to women? I mean, really? They call this a more feminist approach to the movie? Really? Nothing says romance like a guy that will kill your puppy on your wedding night to show you just what you have in store for you. If you've read the book, you know, let's face it, if Heathcliff wasn't handsome, he'd be an episode of Criminal Minds. Like, really? Let's be honest, ladies. And that's coming from me, someone who adores the book and various adaptations. I can still admit this is a train wreck of a romance, and that was what it was meant to be. We'll go into that more later, but look, a lot of people are comparing this to Bridgerton. But see, Bridgerton wasn't claiming to be a famous IP, it was its own thing, and I have my fair share of complaints with that, but at least it had a genuinely interesting world of characters that I was invested in. Here, it's just so empty and lifeless. So just trust me, watch the 2009 version with Tom Hardy. It's free on YouTube right now. It's the perfect palate cleanser. It's the best adaptation I've seen. My only complaint is that they have Tom Hardy's version of Heathcliff sporting the worst mutton chops. They're like Anthony Bridgerton's from season 1 of Bridgerton. They're just horrible. So is romance a predominant theme in the book? Absolutely yes, but this leans so heavily into romance. It romanticizes toxic, abusive relationships. Both leads are abusive in their own way. And look, no adaptation has really focused on horror. What I like so much about Gothic horror in part is that it doesn't focus on sex and violence, but building up a well-crafted, complex story full of dread, atmosphere, and tension, which is what this should have been. Because yes, it's a love story, but it's also a Gothic horror. All versions downplay the horror, and I really would love to see a director like Mike Flanagan, he would be so good, or Del Toro, really leaning into the horror. Show how monstrous Heathcliff and Kathy really are. Show the ramifications of toxic relationships. Show Heathcliff in all his grave-digging, puppy-murdering glory. Plus, let's face it, in the book, these are Victorian-era characters. They share one kiss in the book. It could have been like Crimson Peak, a period movie that added sensuality without making it smutty, and in general that was just such a beautiful movie. Visually it was better in every way. Okay, so let's go into the positives. There are a few of them, believe it or not, before I really go into the meat of the review. Rant, more like it. Okay, so both leads are Australian. Both Jacob Elordi and Margot Robbie are Aussies. As a fellow Aussie, I always like to see the representation. Ewan Mitchell is in this. He is a great actor. He was from another Emerald Fennell movie, Saltburn, and he's also the standout of House of the Dragon to me. Really talented guy. The set design the vintage posters, the cinematography, the costumes, even if they're not period accurate, were beautiful to look at. So it was a beautiful movie visually. Not the best I've seen, but it definitely had some shots that impressed me. And I like that it really showed Kathy's cruelty and that it went both ways. They were both toxic. Because when I heard that it was going to be more of a feminist adaptation, I thought maybe they would downplay that, but no, they definitely don't. So on to the bad. So this feels like Emerald Fennell's fantasy come to life. And look, I'm not saying every nepotism baby that's had a very privileged upbringing can't relate to themes of hardship and class. I'm definitely not saying that, but here it does sound a little tone deaf, the way they completely skip over those themes. I mean, obviously, they've referenced it. We have Elordi's character, Heathcliff, here. Basically, well, not basically, he is called a pet several times by Kathy. There's definitely that divide in class, in station between them, yet it's not really explored with any meaningful depth to it. And considering it's such a large, prominent part of the book, that was a little strange. And it felt like the movie was trying so hard to be sexy, but it just wasn't. It was trying too hard. Look, Elordi is great as an actor in other things that I've seen him in, like Frankenstein. He's a talented guy. I'm not saying he isn't, but he was miscast here. Look, maybe in part he's a good-looking guy, but he's not my type. But it wasn't just that. He lacked any passion, any conviction. He did not sell me as someone who was Heathcliff. He was obviously just reciting lines like, yes, he's an actor, that's his job, but you know, it's like Tom Hardy's version. You lose yourself in it. It's so easy to believe this man is Heathcliff. Elordi just, honestly, it felt like he really didn't want to be there. Almost like he was uncomfortable at times. So the dialogue, I know I'm comparing it a lot, but the 2009 one did such a great job incorporating those famous lines from the book and the passion these two characters had for each other. Here, all the dialogue that made this book so good has been completely left out of it. And they use some of it, the more famous lines, in the marketing, but not for the actual movie. And it just makes it feel so hollow. I can barely believe that these two characters like each other, let alone love each other. There was more heat, more passion, just from a kiss in the 2009 version than all of the smutty scenes in this movie. So I know what Emerald Fennell was trying to do, but she missed the mark and it just came off as really gross, the whole fingers in fish, the eggs and everything. Like, what was with the eggs? Just no. It was almost impressive how she emotionally gutted a story so full of themes heavy, with really intense sort of obsession, trauma, generational trauma, and reduced it to nothing resembling the book. And yes, it was a reimagining, I get that, but still, going this far, given the name, it's like she wanted to capitalize on a marketable IP without actually adding the things to it that made that IP so beloved. Here, Heathcliff doesn't feel like the love of Kathy's life. He feels like a boy toy. Okay, so two of the things that people are discussing, fighting over the most, are the race and the age discussion. And look, when it comes to the age, we've never really had an accurate portrayal with teenagers, not that I can think of anyway, correct me if I'm wrong. Most of them, though, have been with actors well above the age described in the books, and nobody's really said anything until now, and it just felt like it was because Elordi was 7 years younger. You know, it goes the other way in Hollywood all the time. I know people in real life who are really happy with bigger age gaps than that, going both ways. So it felt like, who cares, as long as they have chemistry. But they don't have chemistry. Look, Robbie and Elordi are both talented in their own rights, but they are both miscast. They have no chemistry here. Neither one of them feel like a Kathy or a Heathcliff, and on screen I understood what people were talking about. Margot Robbie felt too old to be acting the way that she was. I'm not trying to age shame anybody, but look, it just felt like these scenes were written for a younger woman. That's not to say grown women can't be immature, but still, the actor that played Kathy in the 2009 version was 27. I feel that that was a good age. So obviously aging up is appropriate given the scenes and all the sauciness of it. But still, I feel like, yeah, going a bit younger would have been better, and an actress that more accurately looked like she could be from that sort of location. I feel like Margot Robbie just couldn't pull it off. I think Elle Fanning would have been a really good choice. Okay, so in my opinion, I know a lot of people will disagree, but this is my review, and I feel Heathcliff is meant to be a Romani, and Elordi could pass for that. The problem is he still wasn't right for the role, and even within the context of this movie, they didn't have anybody making fun of him, shunning him because of his heritage, and they could have had people, saying, oh, you dirty gypsy and horrible things like that. But they just completely brushed over that, and that was a huge, huge theme of the book. It was all about class. The fact that Heathcliff was treated like scum, it ignored what made it so emotionally rich, and it just hollowed out this love story. It was never meant to be a book filled with, hope and a happy ending, but still it had heart and depth to it, and now it's just soulless, an empty, beautiful shell replacing love with lust and smut. And it didn't even deliver on the movie's main selling point, which is basically 50 Shades of Grey in corsets. Not that I'm complaining, I didn't want that, but still it was misleading. There was no nudity, one whole saucy montage of scenes. I mean, I took a loo break, so maybe I missed something, but it just felt like it was PR. It was deliberately provocative to create buzz and distract us from the lack of any real substance. So just like Saltburn was a version of the talented Mr. Ripley, but replacing all the heavy themes with smut, this just does the same thing. It's all style, no substance. Okay, so the opening scene, there was a rumor it was going to be a hanging, and they were right. And I will say, I really liked the score and the feel of that scene in parts. It showed the potential this movie could have had if they had stayed away from it, just going into shock value, trying to be offensive to Christians with the whole nun. And like there's a man being hanged and he's excited at the time of death, and the nun is reacting to that, and it just felt like it was trying to be edgy for the sake of it. It was like the infamous bathtub scene in Saltburn. But yeah, it just felt like it was trying to get Christians like me to clutch their pearls, something new for Hollywood. And if you want to see what the scene was actually meant to be, it was initially meant to be worse. Read on Google at your own peril. And the worst thing is that there were kids in the crowd with this scene. It was totally inappropriate and creepy to have kids talking about that subject matter. I get that the scene was meant to show the depravity and the brutality of the time period that Kathy and Heathcliff were meant to live in, but they could have done that in a way that would have resonated with audiences instead of just grossing them out. So the two leads are people that you're not meant to root for. They're meant to be seen as this destructive force to everybody around them. But here, it sort of undercuts that because we see Kathy actually dies in childbirth, the end, and it felt really abrupt and anticlimactic. And the fact that there's no second generation diminishes the force of Heathcliff's revenge, and it just leaves a huge gap in the story. A huge part of the 2009 version, I know, I can't stop myself, is Heathcliff showing how far he goes. Even in death, he can't let go. His anger, his toxicity is passed on to the next generation, and not having that in this movie, it just feels like it really undercuts the level of obsession he had with Kathy. I really just want a Mike Flanagan or a Del Toro version that goes full horror with him just completely digging up Kathy's grave, ghosts, them going all the way with all of the dark nitty-gritty of the story. I mean, the whole point of the supernatural ending was that Kathy and Heathcliff could only be happy together in death, and Kate Bush even wrote a pop song about it, and it's a really upbeat, happy song, but it's actually got really dark lyrics. It's about Kathy's ghost coming back to haunt Heathcliff. I feel like Emerald Fennell wants to create gross movies but still be seen as a prestigious filmmaker, so she draws inspiration from classics while inserting her own fetishes into it. And it's just sad with this big budget, not that a big budget means a good movie, but what we could have had. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Let me know what you guys think down below. I feel like I would give this a 5 out of 10. Vattie's been generous. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe. I'd really like to know what you guys thought of it. And I'll see you in the next video.